The massive space station floated in the darkness like a crown made of silver and glass. It was the home of the Galactic Council, a group of 17 alien species who had ruled this part of the galaxy for 50,000 years. They had seen many young species rise and fall. They had crushed rebellions, ended wars, and built an empire that stretched across 10,000 star systems. They believed they were the masters of everything. Admiral Catherine Moore stood on the bridge of the Terran dreadnought, relentless, and looked at the station through the view screen. She was 52 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her stood her crew, all of them silent and waiting. "Admiral, they are calling us again," said Lieutenant Daniel Price from the communications station. He was young, barely 25, but he was good at his job. "Put them through," Catherine said. The screen changed to show the face of High Arbiter Zethvicon. He was an insect-like creature with large eyes that looked like broken red gems. His mouth parts clicked together when he spoke, and his voice came through the translator cold and full of pride. "Terran representatives," the Arbiter began. "The Council has made its decision about your species and your expansion into space that belongs to us." Catherine kept her face calm. "We are listening. It will stop all colonization beyond the Orion Spur immediately. You will reduce your military fleet to 50 ships only. You will give us your jump drive technology so we can study it. And you will pay us 30% of everything your empire produces each year." Nobody on the bridge moved. Catherine could feel the anger rising in her crew like heat from a fire, but she did not let it show on her face. "And if we say no," the Arbiter's mouth parts spread wide in something that might have been a smile, "then our combined fleet will come to your homeworld. We have 12,000 warships. We will turn Earth into dust and ash. We will take your people who survive and sell them as slaves to the highest bidder. You have 1 day to agree to our terms." The screen went dark. Commander Samuel Drake, Catherine's second in command, was the first to speak. He was a tall man with dark skin and a scar that ran down the left side of his face. "Admiral, they cannot be serious about this." "They are very serious, Sam." Catherine turned to face her officers. Her eyes were hard like stones. "They have been doing this to younger species for thousands of years. Every time a new civilization reaches the stars, the Council comes to them with the same demands. Give us your weapons. Give us your money. Bow down and serve us. And every single time, the young species has agreed because they were afraid." "But 12,000 ships?" said Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster from the tactical station. "We have less than 700 in our entire navy." "I know. The numbers." Catherine walked to the center of the bridge and stood straight and tall. "But the Council has never met a species like humanity. They do not know our history. They do not know what we have survived. They think we are weak because we are young. They are wrong." She activated the ship-wide communication system. Her voice echoed through every corridor and every room of the Relentless. "All hands, this is Admiral Moore. We have received an ultimatum from the Galactic Council. They want us to surrender. They want us to kneel. They want us to become their slaves. I want every single one of you to think about that for a moment." She paused and let the silence grow heavy. "Our ancestors survived ice ages. They survived plagues that killed half the world. They survived world wars and nuclear fire. When Earth was poisoned and burning, they did not give up. They rebuilt everything from nothing. They reached for the stars because they refused to die in the dirt. And now, after everything our species has been through, some aliens we have never met before think they can threaten us into submission." Catherine smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at its prey. "They have made a very bad mistake. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. The Emperor needs to hear about this." The Relentless turned away from the Council station and jumped into faster-than-light travel. Behind them, the aliens watched and felt satisfied. They had given these humans their warning. Soon, the Terrans would agree to the demands just like every other species before them. It was simply how things worked. High Arbiter. Zethvicon returned to his private chambers and contacted the commanders of the combined fleet. "Admiral Vexthal, of the Korthon Dominion appeared on his screen first. He was a reptile creature with green scales and yellow eyes that never blinked. "The humans have received our terms," Zethvacon told him. "They will comply. They always do. And if they do not," Vexthal asked, "then we will destroy them. It will take perhaps 3 weeks to reach their homeworld, and another week to finish the job. Their fleet is small, and their technology is primitive compared to ours. There is nothing they can do." Vexthal nodded slowly. "I have read the reports about these humans. They are violent. They have been fighting among themselves since they first stood upright. Are you sure they will simply surrender?" Zethvacon made a clicking sound that was his species' version of laughter. "That is exactly why they will surrender. A species that spends so much time fighting itself cannot stand against a united force like ours. They have no discipline, no unity, no hope. I hope you are right, Arbiter. I am always right. That is why I am the High Arbiter." But as the communication ended, Vexthal sat alone in his command center and felt something strange. It was a feeling he had not experienced in a very long time. It took him several minutes to recognize what it was. It was doubt. He had studied the humans more carefully than the other council members. He had read about their history, their wars, their struggles, and he had noticed something that worried him. Every time humans faced extinction, every time they were pushed to the edge of destruction, they did not break. They got angry. And when humans got angry, they became very dangerous. But Vexthal kept these thoughts to himself. The council had made its decision. The fleet was ready. And in one day, the humans would either bow or burn. On the relentless racing toward Earth at speeds that bent the laws of physics, Catherine Moore sat alone in her quarters and looked at a photograph on her desk. It showed a young girl with blonde hair and a bright smile. Her daughter Elizabeth, who was now grown and serving on a patrol ship near the frontier. "We did not come this far to kneel," Catherine whispered to the photograph. "We did not survive everything we survived just to become slaves to creatures who have never known real struggle. They think they are strong because they have numbers. But they have forgotten what strength really means." She stood up and looked out the window at the stars streaking past like lines of white fire. They are about to remember. The message from the Relentless reached Earth 6 hours later. Emperor William Harding read it in his private study, his face showing no emotion. When he finished, he called for an emergency meeting of his war council. The Galactic Council wanted humanity to surrender. They wanted humanity to bow. They wanted humanity to become nothing more than servants and slaves. They had no idea what they had just started. Emperor William Harding was a man who had seen many hard things in his life. He had survived 3 people trying to kill him. He had led his empire through 2 civil wars. He had watched friends die and enemies rise and fall. But he had never felt quite like he felt now. Sitting in the war room beneath the Imperial Palace, reading the Council's demands over and over again. The room was deep underground, protected by 20 meters of steel and concrete and energy shields. Around a long table sat the most powerful military leaders in the Terran Empire. They were all waiting for their emperor to speak. General Patricia Santos commanded all the ground forces of the empire. She was a small woman with dark hair turning gray at the temples, but her eyes were sharp and her mind was sharper. She had won battles on 12 worlds with soldiers who were outnumbered and outgunned. Fleet Admiral Gregory Lane was in charge of the entire Terran Navy. He was tall and thin, with a face that looked like it was carved from stone. He had spent 40 years in space, starting as a simple pilot and working his way up to the highest rank. Admiral Catherine Moore had just arrived from her meeting with the Council. She looked tired but not broken. Her jaw was set firm and her eyes were clear. 12,000 ships, General Santos said quietly. Our entire Navy has 700. 712, Admiral Lane corrected her. We finished building the new cruisers last month. But yes, we are very outnumbered. The Emperor stood up and walked to the holographic map that floated above the table. It showed all of human space. 300 star systems connected by lines of light representing the jump routes. Beyond the borders of the Empire, the map showed the vast territory of the Galactic Council stretching out in all directions like a dark ocean. "Tell me about their capabilities," he said. "What do we know?" Admiral Moore stepped forward. "Their ships are bigger than ours, but slower. Much slower. They use plasma weapons, which our shields can handle better than most energy types. Their fighters are clumsy compared to ours. And most importantly, they have not fought a real war in over 8,000 years. 8,000 years, repeated Senator Maria Vance. She was the civilian representative. A tiv on the War Council, a woman with silver hair and a calm voice. That is a very long time. It is. They have been peacekeepers for so long, they have forgotten how to be warriors. They send their fleet to threaten young species. The young species surrender, and then the fleet goes home. They have never faced anyone who fought back. Till now, the Emperor said. He turned away from the map and looked at each person in the room. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a cold fire that made even the generals uncomfortable. I am not going to surrender. I am not going to bow to creatures who think they can threaten my people into slavery. But I am also not going to send our 700 ships against their 12,000 and hope for a miracle. We need a plan. Admiral Lane cleared his throat. Your Majesty, even with our best tactics, we cannot win a direct battle against those numbers. We would need to hit them where they are weak and run before they can respond. We would need ships they cannot see coming. Ships like the Ghost Fleet, the Emperor asked. The room went very still. General Santos shook her head slowly. Sir, the Ghost Fleet is a story. A rumor we spread to scare the frontier colonies into behaving. It does not actually exist. Emperor William Harding smiled, and something in that smile made everyone in the room feel a chill run down their spine, does it not? He pressed a button on the table, and the holographic map changed. Hidden among the asteroids of the Tau Ceti system, a new icon appeared. Then another in the Epsilon Eridani system. Then more, scattered across a dozen different locations throughout human space. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Ghost Fleet. 200 of the most advanced warships ever built by human hands. Stealth drives that bend light around their hulls. Weapons that fire in complete silence. Crews that have been training in secret for 15 years. They are the most expensive military project in the history of our species, and nobody outside this room knows they exist. Admiral Moore stared at the display with wide eyes. Your Majesty, if we had known about this, ... You did not need to know. Nobody did. The Ghost Fleet was built for exactly this kind of situation. A threat so great that normal weapons would not be enough. An enemy so arrogant that they would never expect to be attacked by ships they cannot see. He turned to Admiral Lane. I want the first battle fleet ready to move in 48 hours. Admiral Moore, you will lead the initial strike force. General Santos, begin mobilizing ground defense forces on all colony worlds. And someone get me Director Sullivan from Military Intelligence. We have a lot of work to do and very little time to do it. The council members began to move, each one heading off to carry out their orders. But Admiral Moore stayed behind for a moment. Your Majesty, she said, may I speak freely? Always, Catherine. Even with the Ghost Fleet, even with everything we have, we are still badly outnumbered. Many people are going to die in the coming weeks. Are you sure this is the right choice? The Emperor walked to the window. Outside, the city of New Chicago spread out beneath a gray sky. 10 million people lived in that city. 200 billion people lived across the Terran Empire. All of them were counting on him to make the right decision. When I was young, he said, my grandfather told me a story about our ancestors. Back when humans still lived on only one world, there was a nation called Greece. A small nation, not very powerful. One day, a great empire called Persia sent a message to Greece, demanding they surrender. The Persian king had an army of millions. The Greeks had only a few thousand soldiers. Turned back to face Admiral Moore. The Greeks said no. They fought against impossible odds. They lost many battles and many good people, but they did not give up. And in the end, they won. Not because they had more soldiers or better weapons, but because they refused to accept defeat. They believed that freedom was worth dying for. The Emperor put his hand on Catherine's shoulder. We are the descendants of people who survived ice ages and plagues and nuclear war. We are the children of explorers who looked at the stars and said, "Those belong to us. If we surrender now, if we bow to these aliens and accept their chains, then everything our ancestors fought for means nothing." So yes, people will die. Good people. Brave people. But they will die fighting for something real. They will die free. And their children and grandchildren will remember them as heroes who stood against tyranny when the whole galaxy said it was impossible. Admiral Moore straightened her back and saluted. "Then we had better make sure we win, Your Majesty." "We will, Catherine. We will." Across the Empire, the war machine began to wake up. Factories that had been making civilian goods started producing weapons. Ships that had been sitting in repair yards were rushed back to service. And in every city, on every world, young men and women walked into recruitment offices, ready to fight for their homes and their families. The Galactic Council had given humanity an ultimatum. They had expected fear and submission. Instead, they had gotten something very different. They had gotten war. Deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the Tau Ceti system. Commander Lisa Crawford had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. She had joined the Ghost Fleet program when she was 23 years old. Now, a young pilot with fast reflexes and a talent for staying calm under pressure. Now, she was 38. And she had spent her entire adult life preparing for a war that most people did not believe would ever come. The message arrived at 3 in the morning. Station time. A single encrypted burst from Earth, containing only 2 words. Protocol. Omega. Lisa read the message twice, then took a deep breath and activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All stations, this is Wraith Command. Execute Protocol Omega. I repeat, execute Protocol Omega." Around her, the massive cavern inside the asteroid began to come alive. Running lights flickered on along the hulls of ships that had been sitting in darkness for years. 200 vessels. Each one painted black and covered with sensors and stealth systems that had cost more than the entire economy of some colony worlds. These were not ordinary warships. They were predators, hunters. They had been built with only one purpose: to strike from the shadows and disappear before anyone knew they were there. Lieutenant Kevin Parks sat at the sensor station next to Lisa. He was a quiet young man who rarely smiled, but he was the best sensor operator in the fleet. "Commander, all ships reporting ready. Reactors are online. Stealth systems are green. Good." Lisa leaned back in her chair and looked at the main view screen. "What do we know about the enemy?" "Intelligence reports that the Council fleet has gathered at their forward base in the Arcturus system. About 8,000 ships. The rest are probably heading to our colony worlds to scare them," arrogant Lisa said quietly. "They split their forces because they think we cannot hurt them, can we?" Lisa smiled. It was not a nice smile. "They are about to find out." The Wraith, the lead ship of the Ghost Fleet, slipped out of the asteroid and into the empty space between stars. One by one, the other ships followed. 200 black shapes moving through the darkness without lights, without sound, without any signal that could be detected by enemy sensors. They were ghosts. And they were going hunting. Meanwhile on Earth, the mobilization continued. Factories ran day and night producing weapons and ammunition. Shipyards worked around the clock to repair damaged vessels and build new ones. And in every city, recruitment offices were overwhelmed with volunteers in New Chicago. A young woman named Nicole Price stood in line outside the recruitment center. She was 24 years old, with brown hair and freckles across her nose. She had been working as a teacher at an elementary school when the Emperor's address came through on every screen in the city. The person in front of her, a tall man with broad shoulders, turned around and looked at her. "You sure about this?
Yes.
It is going to be dangerous out there." "I know," Nicole said. "My grandfather served in the Belt Wars. My mother died defending Colony 7 from raiders when I was 12. Fighting for what matters is what my family does."
Ow.
The man nodded slowly. "My name is Christopher Howard. I used to be a cargo hauler. Never thought I would end up joining the military. Why did you?" Christopher was quiet for a moment. "Because I have 2 kids at home, a boy and a girl, and I want them to grow up free. I want them to look at the stars and know that those stars belong to them, not to some alien council that thinks humans are nothing but slaves waiting to be claimed. They reached the front of the line together. The recruitment officer, an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes, looked at them both. Names and qualifications. Nicole Price. I have a teaching degree and basic pilot training from the Civilian Academy. Christopher Howard. 10 years experience flying cargo ships. I know my way around a spacecraft. The officer typed something into her computer. We need pilots badly. Both of you report to Training Center 7 tomorrow morning at 6. You will have 3 weeks of combat training before being assigned to a ship. 3 weeks? Christopher said. That is not very long. We do not have very long, the officer replied. The Council fleet will be here in about a month. Anyone who can fly a ship and fire a weapon is going to be needed. Next in line, please. Nicole and Christopher walked out of the recruitment center together. The sky abo. Via New Chicago was gray with clouds, but through a gap in the cover, they could see a few stars beginning to appear as evening came. Well, Christopher said, I guess this is really happening. It is. Nicole looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the ghost fleet was moving toward the enemy. Somewhere out there, the future of humanity was being decided. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days on Earth. Before we went to the stars, she said that every generation has a moment when they have to decide what kind of people they want to be. A moment when they have to stand up and fight for something bigger than themselves. You think this is our moment? I know it is. In the Arcturus system, the Council fleet waited with the confidence of predators who had never known fear. 8,000 warships, arranged in perfect formation around the massive space station that served as their forward command center. Admiral Vextal stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars with his unblinking yellow eyes. Any response from the humans? He asked his communications officer. Nothing, Admiral. Their deadline passed 12 hours ago. They have not sent any message. Vextal made a rumbling sound in his throat. He had expected the humans to at least try to negotiate, to beg for more time, to offer some portion of their demands in hopes of mercy. But there had been nothing. Just silence. Strange, he muttered. Very strange. Perhaps they are simply accepting the inevitable, suggested his second-in-command, a younger Korthon named Sefcal. They know they cannot win. Why waste words? Perhaps, but Vextal did not believe it. He had studied humans too carefully. They were not a species that accepted the inevitable. They were a species that fought against it with everything they had. Double the patrol ships around our perimeter, he ordered, and tell all ships to maintain combat readiness, sir. Do you expect an attack? I do not know what to expect. That is what worries me. Outside in the darkness between the stars, 200 ghosts were getting closer. They moved slowly and carefully, their stealth systems bending light around their holes so perfectly that they might as well have been invisible. Commander Lisa Crawford sat in her chair on the Wraith and watched the enemy fleet through her sensors. Look at them, she said quietly. All lined up in neat little rows, like they are on parade instead of preparing for war. They have never had to worry about surprise attacks, Lieutenant Park replied. No species has ever been crazy enough to attack the Council fleet directly. Then I guess we are the first crazy ones. Lisa opened a channel to the rest of the Ghost fleet. All ships. This is Wraith Command. We are in position. Phase 1 will begin in 30 minutes. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. And remember that those aliens out, they think humans are nothing but primitives who will bow down and surrender the moment things get difficult. Paused and let her words sink in. The first ship to die was a destroyer called the Vigilant. It belonged to the Korthon Dominion and had been patrolling the outer edge of the Council fleet formation. One moment it was there, sending routine reports back to the command center. The next moment, it was gone, replaced by a cloud of expanding gas and metal fragments. Admiral Vextal stared at his tactical display, trying to understand what had just happened. Report, he demanded. What destroyed that ship? His sensor officer, a nervous creature with too many eyes, clicked rapidly at his console. Unknown, Admiral. There was no weapon signature. No enemy vessels detected. The ship simply ... exploded. Ships do not simply explode. Yes, Admiral. I know, Admiral. But that is what happened. Before Vextall could respond, another icon on the display flickered and vanished. Then another, and another. Across the fleet, ships were dying. Nobody could see what was killing them. High Arbiter Zethvacon watched from the command station with growing horror. He had never seen anything like this. In all his centuries of service to the Council, no enemy had ever attacked without being seen. No enemy had ever struck without warning. "What manner of weapons do these humans possess?" whispered one of his advisors. Zethvacon did not answer. He did not know Commander Lisa Crawford, watched through her enhanced display as the Ghost Fleet carved through the enemy formation. Her ships moved like shadows, appearing just long enough to fire their weapons before vanishing again. The Council fleet was huge and powerful, but they could not fight what they could not see. Wraith 7. "You are drifting too close to their sensor range," she warned through her communication system. "Correcting course now. Command." More enemy ships died. The Ghost Fleet pilots had trained for 15 years for this moment. They knew exactly how to move, exactly when to strike, exactly when to disappear. They were artists of destruction, painting death across the darkness of space. "Phase 2, Lisa ordered. Light them up." 200 ships dropped their stealth fields at the same moment. For 30 seconds, they became visible to every sensor in the system. And for those 30 seconds, they fired everything they had. Missiles streaked through space in clouds of white exhaust. Energy beams cut through enemy hulls like hot knives through butter. Kinetic rounds traveling at 1/10 of the speed of light punched through armor that had never been tested in real combat. The Council fleet had lost 400 ships before they even knew they were under attack. They lost another 300 in the next 30 seconds. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the Ghost Fleet vanished again. Vextall stared at his tactical display with something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Real. Cold, terrible fear. "What are these things?" Sevkal asked, his voice shaking. "Humans," Vextall replied. "They are humans." But the Ghost Fleet was only the beginning. At the edge of the Arcturus system, space itself seemed to tear open like a wound in the fabric of reality. The Terran First Battle Fleet emerged from jump space in perfect formation. 700 ships, their weapons charged, and their shields at full power. With Admiral Gregory Lane commanding from the Dreadnought Sovereign, Al Ship's Lane announced through the fleet communication channel, "Weapons free. Let them know we are here." The Terran fleet did not fight like the Council expected. The Council species formed orderly lines and exchanged fire at maximum range, where their superior numbers gave them the advantage. The humans did something completely different. They charged. The Terran ships dove straight into the enemy formation. Weaving between the larger Council vessels like wolves among sheep, they targeted command ships and supply vessels with surgical precision. They used their superior speed and maneuverability to stay out of the enemy's firing arcs while pouring destruction into their flanks and engines. Admiral Catherine Moore led the charge from the bridge of the Relentless. Her ship punched through the enemy center like a fist through paper, guns blazing in all directions.
"Admiral?"
"We are taking heavy damage to the forward sections," reported Commander Drake. "Shields are at 40% and falling." "Then angle us so they hit the parts that still work," Catherine replied without looking away from the view screen. "Keep firing." A massive Council battleship loomed ahead of them, its weapons glowing as it prepared to fire. Catherine did not slow down. She did not turn away. "Target their main reactor," she ordered. "All forward batteries." The Relentless fired. And a moment later, the battleship exploded in a ball of orange fire that consumed 2 smaller escort ships with it. "That is for threatening my homeworld," Catherine said quietly. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of fire and death and chaos. The Council fleet had numbers on their side, but the humans had something more important. They had the will to fight. They had training that had prepared them for exactly this kind of close-range combat. and they had rage. Centuries of rage from a species that had been told they would be enslaved or destroyed. Vexthal watched his fleet crumble around him. Ship after ship was destroyed. Commanders he had known for centuries died screaming as their vessels broke apart. The neat formations that had always served the Council so well became a mess of burning wreckage and fleeing survivors. Arbiter, he transmitted to Zethvakan, we must retreat. We cannot win this battle. Retreat? The Arbiter's voice was shrill with disbelief. The Council does not retreat. We have never retreated. Then we will die. All of us. Is that what you want? There was a long silence. Around them, the battle continued. More ships died on both sides. But the Council was losing far more than the humans. Very well, Zethicon said finally. Order the retreat. The Council fleet began to pull back, their ships jumping to faster-than-light speed as fast as they could calculate safe coordinates. They left behind the burning hulks of 4,000 warships. Nearly half their force, destroyed in a single battle, the humans had lost 93 vessels. 93 crews who would never go home to their families. Admiral Moore stood on her damaged bridge and looked at the wreckage floating in space around her. We won, Commander Drake said. There was no joy in his voice. Against all odds, we actually won. This battle, Catherine replied. We won this battle. The war's not over yet. But she allowed herself a small smile. The Galactic Council had thought humanity would surrender without a fight. They had thought humans were weak and primitive and afraid. They had learned the truth. The hard way. Across the fleet, crews that had been fighting for hours finally allowed themselves to breathe. Some cheered. Some cried. Some sat in silence, staring at the stars and thinking about the friends they had lost on the Wraith. Commander Lisa Crawford watched the Council fleet flee and felt something she had not felt in 15 years of waiting. Satisfaction. Everyone, she said to her ghost fleet, stay sharp. This is only the beginning. On Earth, the news of the victory spread within hours. People poured into the streets to celebrate. Strangers hugged each other. Children waved flags. And in every corner of the Empire, people looked up at the stars and knew that humanity had done the impossible. They had faced the masters of the galaxy and made them. Emperor William Harding received the news in his private study. He read the casualty reports carefully, honoring each name with a moment of silence. Then he turned to his window and looked out at the celebrating crowds below. They think we have won, he said to himself. But the Council will not accept this defeat. They will come back with more ships, more weapons, more determination. This war has just begun. He straightened his back and turned away from the window. But so have we. The Council chamber had never been so quiet. 17 species, their representatives gathered around the great circular table that had stood for 50,000 years, stared at the holographic display showing the aftermath of the Battle of Arcturus Gate. 4,000 of their ships, reduced to nothing but scattered debris floating in the cold. Darkness of Space, Representative Yulmoth of the Sindari Collective was the first to speak. His gelatinous body quivered with distress as his translation device converted his thoughts into words. This is impossible. No primitive species has ever done this to us. No young civilization has ever dared to fight back. They are not primitive, High Arbiter, Zethvakan said. His voice was hollow and tired. He had not slept since the battle. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw ships burning. He saw admirals he had known for centuries dying in fire and vacuum. We were fools to think otherwise. We looked at their short history and their internal conflicts and assumed they were weak. We were wrong then. What do we do now? Demanded Representative Thalkith of the Verkesh Empire. Send more ships? We still have 8,000 vessels scattered across the border regions. We can gather them, and what? Zethvakan interrupted. Send them to be destroyed like the others? The humans have weapons we cannot see. Ships that strike from nowhere and vanish like smoke. Our tactics do not work against them. Our numbers do not matter if we cannot find our enemy before they find us. The chamber fell silent again. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council did not know what to do. Then the doors opened. Admiral Catherine Moore walked in, flanked by a squad of Terran Marines in full combat armor. Their weapons were holstered, but their presence was a message that could not be misunderstood. Behind Catherine came Ambassador Marcus Webb, a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had spent 30 years in the diplomatic service, negotiating with everyone from frontier pirates to corporate executives. This was, by far, the most important negotiation of his career. "Hi, Arbiter," Marcus said pleasantly, as if he was greeting an old friend instead of an enemy who had threatened to destroy his entire species. "I believe you requested this meeting." Zethvacon's mandibles clicked nervously. "The Council wishes to discuss ... terms. Terms." Catherine let the word hang in the air like a blade waiting to fall. "Interesting. A few weeks ago, you demanded we dismantle our fleet, surrender our technology, pay tribute like conquered slaves. And if we refused, you would burn Earth and sell our children into bondage. Do you remember that? The situation has changed," Zethacon managed. "Yes, it has." Marcus took a seat at the table without being invited. Catherine remained standing behind him, her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes moving across every face in the room. "So here are humanity's terms. First, the Council will formally recognize Terran sovereignty over all systems we currently occupy, plus a buffer zone extending 50 light-years in all directions. That includes territories belonging to 3 Council member species." Yulmoth protested. "They should have thought about that before threatening our homeworld. Second, the Council will pay reparations for the unprovoked military action against Terran vessels and citizens. We will accept 5% of annual Council revenue for the next century. Outrageous. Third, and most important, the Council will abolish the practice of demanding tribute from younger species. Your covenant of primacy is finished. Any species capable of reaching the stars has earned the right to exist free and unmolested. No more slavery. No more extortion. No more treating the young civilizations of this galaxy as property to be exploited." Zethvacon rose from his seat, his compound eyes blazing with anger. "You cannot dictate terms to us. We are the Galactic Council. We have ruled this region of space for 50,000 years. Who are you to challenge our authority?" Catherine stepped forward, and something in her eyes made the High Arbiter step back despite himself. "We are humans. We crawled out of caves and learned to make fire. We survived ice ages that froze our planet and plagues that killed half our population. We invented writing and mathematics and medicine. We built ships that crossed oceans and then ships that crossed the void between stars. And when our own weapons nearly destroyed our world, we did not give up. We rebuilt. We adapted. We survived." She took another step forward. "You think you are powerful because you have numbers and territory and thousands of years of history. But you have never faced real adversity. You have never been pushed to the edge of extinction and clawed your way back. You do not understand what strength really means." "You understand strength," Zethvacon hissed. "We have conquered hundreds of species. You have bullied hundreds of species. There is a difference. The moment someone actually fought back, your entire military fell apart in ours. Your commanders did not know what to do when their enemies refused to form neat lines and die according to schedule." Silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, Representative Thalvina of the Malurian worlds rose to speak. Her voice, translated through her mechanical vocoder, carried something that sounded almost like hope. "The Malurians support the Terran proposal." Yulmoth's gelatinous form rippled with shock. "What? For too long, the Council has ruled through fear and exploitation. We joined this alliance because we had no choice. Our ancestors were given the same ultimatum the humans received: surrender or be destroyed. They chose survival, but they never forgot the humiliation. They never stopped dreaming of freedom." She turned to face Catherine and Marcus. "The humans have shown us something we forgot was possible. Resistance, defiance, the courage to say no to tyrants, even when the odds seem impossible. The Malurians stand with humanity." One by one, other voices joined hers. "The Sindari, whose ancestors had been conquered when their species was still young, the Verkesh, who had chafed under council taxation for millennia, the Palladian League, who had watched helplessly as other species were enslaved and could do nothing to help. Zethva Khan watched his alliance crumble around him. Half the council was turning against him, siding with the very species he had tried to destroy. "This is not over," he hissed at Catherine. "Even if we accept your terms today, there will be others who will not forget this insult. You have made enemies." Catherine smiled, a warrior's smile without warmth or mercy. "Good. We would rather have enemies who respect us than friends who see us as nothing but servants. And the next time you or anyone else thinks about threatening humanity, remember what happened at Arcturus Gate. Remember what happens when you mistake our patience for weakness." She leaned closer to the High Arbiter. "And remember that we have more ships where those came from." 3 months later, the Treaty of New Harmony was signed aboard the Terran Station Unity, orbiting Earth. Representatives from 17 species watched. As Marcus Webb and the new council, leadership put their marks on the document that would reshape galactic politics for generations. To come, the Covenant of Primacy was abolished. Younger species would no longer be forced to pay tribute or surrender their technology. The buffer zone around Tehran's space was established. And for the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Council was no longer the supreme power in this part of the galaxy. Emperor Liam Harding stood at the observation window of the Imperial Palace, watching the celebration fireworks paint the night sky above New Chicago. Colors exploded against the darkness, red and gold and blue, reflecting off the glass towers of the city. General Santos stood beside him. "We won," she said. "Against everything they threw at us, we actually won. This battle, yes. Act." The Emperor's expression remained thoughtful. "But we have made powerful enemies. The hardliners on the Council will not forget this humiliation. And there are other powers out there, beyond the Council's borders, who will take notice of what humanity has accomplished. Some will want to be our friends. Others will see us as a threat. Should we be worried?" Emperor William Harding smiled, and in that smile was the entire stubborn, brilliant, terrifying history of the human race. All the wars they had survived, all the disasters they had overcome, all the moments when extinction seemed certain and they had refused to accept it. "Let them come," he said. "Let them all come. They will learn the same lesson the Council did." Turned from the window to face his general. Outside, the fireworks continued to explode, and the people of Earth continued to celebrate their impossible victory. Humanity does not bow. We rise. In the years that followed, other species would join the new alliance that humans had created. Species that had been bullied and exploited for thousands of years finally found the courage to stand up for themselves. The galaxy began to change, slowly but surely. The old order gave way to something new, and at the center of that change stood humanity. Still young, still learning, still making mistakes, but no longer afraid, no longer willing to accept a universe where the strong preyed on the weak without consequence. They had looked into the darkness between the stars and refused to be afraid. They had faced an enemy that outnumbered them 20 to 1 and refused to surrender. They had been told that resistance was impossible and proved that nothing was impossible if you were willing to fight for it. They were human, and they had only just begun.